Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon, with your co-host, Gamby, and we're here with another Unsustainable Wednesday. We decided to have me intro it this time as I did the solo episode on the last one, and I don't really get to intro it that much. I don't have the same energy. It's nighttime. Let's just leave it at that and get on with the show.
We wanted to preserve a little bit of continuity here. It's like last time the episode leaves on a cliffhanger, and you're like, oh my God, is Gamby going to be back? And then I am, and you all get sad. So, we had to really keep the continuity going here. Now, one thing before we get into the episode, did want to mention, so Patreon in the past, you can still do this, but you were able to listen in while we record live. But we realized that one of the big perks of that was that you got the episode before anybody else. And that might be, an advantage to you if you wanted to share with your leagues, for example, or your league mates listen. And this gets you the episode almost a whole day before if you listen to us record. But we realized, of course, not a lot of people can listen in all the time whenever we so happen to record. So we're going to be releasing episodes early now for patrons and giving you a link so that you can go and download or listen. And it'll normally be between about a day to 2 days in advance before we actually release the episode. So before we edit everything and release. So just a little bit of a new perk. So if you are interested in that, be sure to check it out on our website. You can find the Patreon link there or on our Twitter at FantasyHockeyPD. Website is fantasyhockeypodcast.com. And now let's get into the episode. So I'll start with my first Unsustainably High here in Alex Killorn, left wing, right wing, 26% owned, 20% shooting over his last 11 games. On-ice shooting percentage is 20% over his last 11 games. Talk about continuity right there. And over his last 2 games, his on-ice shooting is 27%. He's almost doubled his secondary assist rate this year, too, compared to last year. So a lot of things going on that point to this not continuing going forward.
Yeah, for sure. The one I actually have on my list, too, I really like his shots and his power play production beyond that. And by power play production, I really mean deployment, because I feel like that fourth slot on that power play one kind of is not really set in stone. It could be it's been Cirelli, it's been Killorn, it's been Palat. It's fluctuated quite a bit this season.
Yeah, that being said, even though I have him on Unsustainably High, I actually did pick him up in a few leagues. So I like like you said, his deployment. And I think that even though it's Unsustainably High, the Lightning are the one team where when someone goes Unsustainably High, I just question myself a little bit and think, maybe this player can be a little crazy for a bit.
Yeah, I would like to see him on a better line. Like his deployment on the power play is fine. Cirelli's been pretty good as well, but that line in as a total, he doesn't have any of the studs on his line. He doesn't have Point, Kucherov, or Stamkos. It's Killorn, Cirelli, and Conacher. What?
Wow.
He's still
Why'd you struggle with that one?
Yeah, he's still in the NHL. I mean, I know he was in the AHL for a while, but did they actually play that line last time? Who did he play with last game?
Dude,
okay, he played with Stamkos and Cirelli last
people.
game. Okay, that's better. Daily Faceoff is showing a new line. I don't know if that's been updated or what the deal is, but actually it hasn't been, because these are super fresh lines. We're recording this Tuesday night, so a lot of the stats we're going to list here don't include these games, but Tuesday night's game, it was Killorn, Stamkos, Cirelli. So that's a much better line than what's being displayed. So...
Also, Brandon is all over the place, and we're actually recording this Monday night. But
Monday night.
For whatever purpose this is, this might be Tuesday night, wherever you're listening.
I'm just so used to it being the day before Wednesday.
I know. It's weird. This is a Tuesday Unsustainable Wednesday. Yeah. It's weird. It's throwing us off. Okay, you go into your next Unsustainable.
All right, my next one is Christian Dvorak. Center left wing, 16%. He's been really good lately, and a lot of people are taking notice. He's been recommended quite a bit to be picked up. The problem is, his shooting has been better lately. I'll give him that, but it's still not very good. Like, we're seeing the best pace that we've seen in the last 2 years from him over the last 4 games, and that's 160. I don't know. It's just not enough. It's not enough to justify hanging on to a guy like him that's not going to get you a whole lot. I wouldn't be expecting anything north of like a 55-point pace. I think a 60-point pace is a ceiling, but with terrible peripherals. So what are you really gaining there? That the power play over there has been kind of unpredictable lately, but he is on the first unit, which is, I guess, as good as it gets. But all things considered, I don't expect much from him, but I do like him as a streaming option on good weeks for Arizona. This is not a good week for Arizona. He also has something like a 16% shooting on the season, which no.
Yotes fans must really hate us, you know? We always find someone to pick on,
Yeah, I know.
whether it's Kessel or Keller or
At least we like
Garland or,
Chikrin and their goalies.
yeah, we like Chikrin. Yeah, it's true. I actually do have a Yote on Sustainably High, so I guess we'll make it up to you later in the episode.
Do I? I don't. Sorry.
You do not. Sorry, Brandon hates the Yotes. Okay. Now, before I go into my next one here, I wanted to mention actually something that I just remembered while recording this on the Sit Start Saturday live stream. Someone had asked us something about just stats in general, I guess, or how to handle our unsustainable calls. And I actually remembered that this is a good time to bring it up, considering this is the episode in which we talk about unsustainability. And really, the way to use our unsustainable calls are not calls to drop or calls to add or warning signs that this player sucks. They're really just, hey, here's something that's going on that you should probably pay attention to. If a player is shooting too little, but they should be shooting more, so watch when the shooting changes. It's really just more of indicators. We can't tell you. It's a like I said, I think on the weekend preview, it's a fool's game to try to predict exactly when. Like, we can't tell you, oh, this player is shooting at 20%, so that means in 3 games he's going to fall off a cliff. We don't know that. It could be 2 weeks. It could be 3 weeks. But the point of the matter is that at
just
some
not happen
point,
to shoot 20% the whole season.
exactly. But those are outliers, right? And at the end of the day, all we're saying is, hey, here's a guy that you should probably pay attention. And if someone ends up on Unsus High, for example, what you should take from that is not, I need to drop this player right now. That just means I probably don't need to be that married to this person. So if they start to slump, I can drop because it wasn't sustainable anyways. If someone comes after him in a trade proposal, I probably am okay trading him. That's really more so what it is. It's not really us, saying anything very overarching about their performance in terms of pick up or drop. And if we do mean that, if we do mean like someone is worth dropping or picking up, we'll make that clear, or at least we'll try to.
We'll try to.
I guess. Yeah, we'll try to. Okay, now that I've gone on that spiel, I've had a lot of spiels today. Wow, for recording at night, I have a lot of energy. My next one here is Alex Tuck, left wing, right wing, 29% owned. This is all my guys here on Unsustainably High this week have over 20% shooting or at 20% shooting. Alex Tuck, in his case, over the last 4 games when all this hoopla started and everyone started picking him up like crazy and asking if he's back, he's shot at 25%. Over that same stretch, his on-ice shooting percentage has been 20%. Very low power play time on ice, but the positive there is that he does get very heavy offensive zone starts. So even though he's low on the power play side, when it comes to 5-on-5 time, he spends almost all of it in the offensive zone. So that's good, but of course, this 25% shooting and 20% on-ice shooting is not going to stick.
I actually picked up Tuck for this week, but it's because Vegas is one of those teams that skips Saturday. So again, like you were saying, just because we say somebody's unsustainably high, it typically means that the indicators are showing a drop-off at some point, but that doesn't mean that they're definitely a bad player or need to be dropped immediately or they have no value. It's more just don't believe what you're seeing for like a rest of season pace. And oftentimes, just like this, somebody will show up on Unsustainably High and also be in a good position for the week. It just happens. So, and this is more, the only reason I picked up Tuck is because Vegas avoids Saturday, which is not easy this week. Okay. My next and last one, because you took Killorn from me, as you would, is Ryan Graves. Now, I think that Graves, I hope that Graves is being picked up more for peripherals than anything. He's already at 23% ownership, and I guess he scored tonight. So this being Monday night, that goal is not reflected in the stats I'm about to mention, but and that game's still going on actually. But he is shooting at 9% on the season, which is high for a defenseman, but weirdly lower than last season. But he only played a handful of games last season, so what can you say on that? And shooting above double digits or even above 9% for a defenseman is basically unheard of. Just doesn't happen. And his on-ice shooting is 15% of the season, 20% in the last 14 games. It's just really, really high. For a defenseman, even an elite defenseman, you'd expect that to be... An elite defenseman, you'd expect somewhere between maybe 10 and 11. And then on a standard, like a regular defenseman on like a regular team, that's going to be around somewhere between 8 and 9, maybe 9 to 10. But for his to be as high as it is at 15% of the season, 20% over the last 14 days is just madness. He's just has the touch right now. But it's smoke and mirrors. He's a good peripheral guy. If you're picking up for peripherals, that's fine. And again, this is another one of these. He's unsustainably high, but I picked him up in one of the leagues because Colorado is the only team with 3 off nights, as we mentioned on yesterday. So or I guess Monday, whenever we released that. he's got the right schedule. So and I need the peripherals. So he's still got value, but don't be buying him for the points. Just like the fact that he can score points, but really be doing it for the peripherals.
Yeah, along that same vein of someone who just kind of has the touch at the moment is Tanner Pearson on the Vancouver Canucks, left wing, 19% owned over the last week. Actually, I think it's over the last 30 days. Let me make sure of this really quick. So over the last 7 days, he has a 20% shooting. Over the last 30 days, which is 13 games, effectively, it's 19%. So not really that difference. He's just kind of been insane over this entire last 13 game stretch. On top of that, he has a 15% shooting, very high, on ice shooting, sorry. Very low power play percentage. And this is kind of insane. His offensive zone start percentage is ridiculously low. So over the last 13 games, he's had 42% offensive zone starts, already very low. You tend to be a defensive player in that situation. What's really insane is that over these last 2 games in which he went point per game, he only played 16 minutes a game, but his offensive zone start was only 14%.
Wow.
I mean, he might as well be a defenseman at that point. And so, yeah, maybe he's getting some breaks and whatnot that are, going his way. And yeah, he's a little bit lucky, but I definitely would not consider this a long-term hold by any means.
Right. All right, let's move into sustainably high then. Or no, let's move into unsustainably low then, because that's
Nice
the next
try.
one. I got excited for a second. My first one, and this is kind of funny because, again, like we mentioned, there's games going on right now, and this has already changed. So this player is going to make me look good and a hack at the same time. Is Brock Nelson, center left wing, 50% owned. A lot of people are dropping him recently. I'm still pretty high on him. His shot pace is the highest it's ever been. He's up almost 50% year over year. 180 shots last season. He's pacing at, or no, not pacing. That's not the right word. He's on a over a 3 shot per game pace at the moment, which is fantastic. And more recently, last 30 days, and even more recently than that, he's over 300. He has been shooting like a madman. That pace is nuts. And what we're seeing here is a very low on ice shooting percentage, 3% over his last 14 days. That's 7 games, 3% on ice shooting. Not good. But yeah, like I mentioned, he scored 2 goals. So by the time this comes out, it's going to be maybe a little bit of an obvious pick. But I promise you, when I put him on this paper, he did not have any goals. So yay or something.
If you remember the hot hands I did on the Isles trio, Brock Nelson was the one I was highest on. And I agree with you. I'm still highest on Brock Nelson of all those Isles that are doing
If he
well.
keeps shooting like this, the fact that it took him this long to get to 50% ownership seems surprising to me. Anytime somebody's
Yeah,
shooting more
I
than 3
agree
times a
100%.
game and is actually getting points, like you wind up like, why is Brock Nelson not in the same conversation with some of the guys like Jeff Skinner and Cam Atkinson, who are volume shooters but sometimes struggle? I don't know. Maybe he is at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. My next one, and I only have one actually. I think it's kind of fitting that my only one, because honestly, there were a lot of unsustainably low guys that I kind of wanted to put, but they were borderline on other ones. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to force it. I'm just going to wait a week and see what some of these guys do. But my only one here, fitting that it comes right after the Isles, is John Tavares, center, 99% owned. My opinion, very unsustainably low. I understand the frustration. I can see where it's coming from. It makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I understand why it could be frustrating. But there's a lot of really positive things too. His minutes are up from last year over the last 14 games, up to around 20 minutes a game. Last year he played 19 minutes a game, so that's up. His shooting is pretty solid. Over the season, it's down. The pace is not as great as last season. But if you look at just the last 14 games and even the last 3 games, it's gone up quite a bit, and that's really promising for him. And the shooting percentage is kind of right in line. He's scoring just about what you'd expect. 6 goals over his last 14 games, 5.75 expected goals for, so right on the dot. What's really hurting him at the moment is his on-ice shooting percentage. His IPP is perfect, almost exactly in line with last year's, but his on-ice shooting percentage is what has dipped a lot. And when you're a team like Toronto, it does hurt you because there's just so many goals you could be getting in on, or they should be scoring. And over the last 14 games, his on-ice shooting percentage is just paltry, at least paltry for him, 9.29%. And last year, his on-ice shooting percentage was 12.5%. So there's a lot better that he can be doing there. And honestly, I think people are overreacting a little bit too much. And on top of that, like that injury that he had takes some time to recover from. I know we like to think of athletes, I think, as superstars, or just superheroes who can
Superhuman.
come back from anything, and superstars. He is a superstar, but like superheroes who can come back from absolutely anything at any time. But messing up your thumb hurts, and we saw that in his first game back, right, where he missed the net. So I think that there's going to be an adjustment period for him. But the positive thing is he's scoring goals. It's coming down to the team around him scoring. It's promising that his IPP is the same. His secondary assist rate is the same as it was last year. Everything kind of looks in line for him. He's missing about, right now from a pace perspective, he's missing around 20 points. And in my opinion, that entirely just comes from that low on ice shooting percentage. And if that were to kick back up, you'd see him right at where you'd expect him to be.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about John Tavares, but okay, I've got two more, and they're actually pretty similar. The first one's Braden Point. He's not that bad, really, but there are some indicators that he should be improving, and I get that there's always frustration on a player of his caliber when he goes any length of time without getting a ton of points. The thing to point out here is that his IPP, his individual points pace, percentage is 50%, which, if you don't know what IPP is, it's basically the amount of points that a player is involved in that are scored while he's on the ice. So if a goal goes in while he's standing on the ice, if he got a goal and assist, then it counts. If it doesn't, it's against him. So for an elite player, you'd expect that to be about somewhere between 65 and 70%. Some will go a little higher than that, but it's usually not that sustainable. Last season, Braden Point was a 65%. This season, he is below 50. And even worse, over the last 30 days, only 40%. This is where the big key is. Now, Braden Point's on-ice shooting percentage is about the same as it was last season at 14.5%, which is really, really high. But it's still, even when you talk about the line mates he has, it still feels a little high, but they've shown they can do it for a long period of time now. So I kind of consider that kind of in his wheelhouse. So I'm not overly concerned about that. It's just the big thing to point out is there's goals going in. He just manages not to be a part of them. And I don't think it's going to keep up considering he's a center pivot and he makes things happen. So I think he's going to be just fine. And I get that he's still at a 72-point pace, just slowed down a little bit recently, but I actually think he'll be closer to 80 by the end of the season. I never thought he was going to get back to his 90 plus from last season, but he should flirt with point per game, I think. And then my last one is Mark Stone. Mark Stone has one of the best shots in the league, if you didn't know. Typically shoots at 16, 17% on the season. It's one of the higher numbers in the league. This season is at 13% on the course of the season, but the more concerning thing is our last 30 days is at 8%, 6% over the last 14 days, which is 7 games, and 0% over the last 4 games. What we're seeing here is not only is he not scoring, because obviously we're seeing that with his shooting percentage, the downside of what's happening is he's shooting less, which is bad. I don't really think that's going to stick because everything else seems the same. His on ice or his time on ice is about the same. His power play ice time is right in line with what we usually see from him. Just shooting a little less for some reason. He also doesn't get offensive zone starts, but that's not that surprising because Mark Stone is so good defensively. It's kind of an unfortunate side effect of being an actual good player. But the thing is, not only with this low shooting, he's also getting very low on ice shooting. So a funny little stat here is over his last 4 games, he actually has 100% IPP, meaning every goal that's gone in with him on the ice, he's been a part of. But there's only been 1. So he's got 1 assist in 4 games, and that's all his line has been able to produce. That's just kind of indicative of what's going on with Vegas at the moment. I don't think there's any one guy you can point out, including Mark Stone. I think they're just in a bit of a rough spot. I wouldn't overreact to what's happening. I don't think he's sustainably low or anything. I do think that his shots are going to turn around. I don't really know what is happening over there at the moment, but I can't imagine it's sticking around for too long.
Yeah, I'd agree. So now that you've finished us off there with Unsustainably Low, and the good take on Mark Stone, I wanted to take him as well, but I found out that you had him. I'll move into Sustainably High and mention the yote that I had talked about, and that's Clayton Keller. Left wing, right wing, only 46% owned, and things have kind of turned a corner for him. There's some really promising signs.
He's hurt me too many times.
Yeah, same. I was very, very hesitant to put him here. I was very, very hesitant. I was very scared because like you said, he's burned many of us many times, right? Now on the pace, he's pacing for 51
Mm-mm.
points.
Can't say pacing.
Not bad.
He's on pace for.
He's on pace. I got one word right. He's on pace for 51 points on the season. Over the last 4 games, he's gone point per game. But what's more impressive to me is what he's done in his last 16 games and these last 4 games as well. His shooting percentage is right in line. His shot pace has come way up from last year. Over the last 4 games, he's pacing for 308 shots and still had a 6.6% shooting percentage. That's awesome. His on-ice shooting percentage was only 7.8%. Granted, he had a 100% IPP, but look, let's give him a little bit of slack over 4 games. His IPP should be a little bit lower than what it has been as of late. And the problem with Clayton Keller, which is honestly a problem with all Arizona Coyotes forever till the end of time, it seems, is that they will always have a low on-ice shooting percentage. That is just, unless you play with Nick Schmaltz, then I guess you get a 20% on-ice shooting percentage. But without Nick Schmaltz, you're going to have a low on-ice shooting percentage. And so that's the thing that hurts him. If that could ever turn around, I could absolutely see Clayton Keller be a point per game player. So right now, even though he's been doing well, I still see him as like a 60, 65 point guy, I guess, now if this gets better, with potential for more, again, if that on-ice shooting percentage gets better. And one of the promising things, too, is that his power play percentage over these last 4 games, so in this past week when the hoopla around Keller started, his percentage on the power play has actually gone up to 64%, which is similar to 65% last year, which is really promising. So that's one thing to pay attention to. And of course, we saw him get a lot of power play points this week. So the fact too that he has 10 power play points already compared to his 19 last year is also a great sign for me. That's what you would always want from Clayton Keller's more power play points, if anything, if he's at least not doing 5-on-5. So he may become a guy who you could pick up and potentially kind of be a little bit of a power play point specialist, although I wouldn't bank on that. Either way, I'm high on Clayton Keller, at least for the near to medium term. I'm not sure if he's a long term, because when you have a tough schedule for the Arizona Coyotes, Keller is most likely going to be your droppable guy.
Yep.
Simply because his ceiling isn't that good. But when you can play him, I like him as an option, especially if his shooting continues to go up.
Yeah, I agree. Although Keller, but
I know.
okay. So my first one, I feel like this is not going to take anybody by surprise anymore, is Anthony Duclair. Yep,
Just name the show
I
after
know.
him.
He's the guy this season for me. He's the guy. Left wing, right wing, 17%, which is going to go up because he has 2 goals and an assist tonight. Before I wrote this, which is cool, I guess. The thing is, what I'm liking is that everything is sort of, I mean, his shooting's a little too high, and it's going to be even higher after these more stats come in from his 2 goals from tonight. But his on-ice shooting is like reasonable, 8% on the season, 8% over the last 30 days. A little higher, like 12% over the last week, but that's not that bad in 3 games. His power play percentage is still around 53%. What I like is his shooting, and what's not to like. He's at a, you know what, this is not even including, I think he got 6 or 7 shots tonight. So not even including that game over his last 14 days. He's at a 328 shot pace. Over his last week, he's at a 410 shot pace. He's been shooting like an absolute madman. And a lot of them are going in, which is a bonus. But it's just I for the longest time, Duclair was my pickup on good weeks, and now I really am trying to I'm trying to take him out of the streamer spot and make him a long-term hold. He and Armia are basically fighting for the last spot on my team at the moment, but it works out well enough for me because oddly enough, in my main league, I have room for both, and I'm not benching this week, which must be lucky. I don't know how I pulled that one off, but it lets me evaluate them both for a little bit longer to figure out who's going to make the cut. But I do think it's going to be Duclair. He's showing all the right signs. He's in the right position. Moving down to that second line, if you want to call it that, has been beneficial for him, I guess. He seems to be showing some chemistry with Chris Tierney. And his ice time hasn't dipped at all. So nothing to worry about there. Really liking what I'm seeing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've said I agree with Duclair a million times to you. I think people know how I feel about Duclair. I picked him up too, honestly. Quite a few leagues. I think he could become a long-term option for sure as well. Okay, so my next one here is on the Winnipeg Jets, and that's Kyle Connor.
Whee!
Yeah, left wing, 79%
We got
owned.
asked about dropping
Granted,
him a lot of times this season.
Yeah, and it's weird because he hasn't, if you look at his last 13 games, his pace is 82 points. Like, he's been great. He's gotten point per game over his last 13 games. Granted, he went a little insane over these last 3 games with 5 points, but still. And there's so many promising signs with him. So many things to be excited about. His shooting percentage is only 11% right now on the season. Last year, it was 15%. So he's already more sustainable from that perspective and shooting better. He's shooting more times, which is helping him out. His individual Corsi foreplay, so how much offense he generates, essentially, to dumb it down, is way higher than last year. It's up 19%, which is huge for him. It means he's driving offense a little bit more. His IPP, pretty much right in line. It's actually seen a healthy increase, which I'm not surprised by because he's playing top line, top power play. Almost no matter who's on that top line, Kyle Connor is the mainstay, it seems to be, aside from when they sometimes try Patrick Laine and then they realize, okay, wait, actually, we don't want Patrick Laine up there only, and we need 2 other people that are good around him. Anyways, his on-ice shooting percentage is also healthy at 10%. Last year, he had a 12% on-ice shooting, so everything is good. His team power play percentage is up. Everything looks great for Kyle Connor. And the crazy thing is that he's actually had quite a few shots on the power play over these last 13 games, 8 to be in fact, and he hasn't scored one of them. And so there's still room for power play goals there. And I also would like to see him shoot a little bit more on the power play. But everything else looks so promising. His hits pace is up a lot too. It's actually up 203%. He's going from 9 hits to 27.
Whee!
But look, jokes aside, Kyle Connor has a lot going for him. So I wouldn't be quick to pull the trigger and think you're selling high. And I also definitely would not be thinking about dropping him.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's been asking for a while, luckily. But my next one here, I mentioned another player I've mentioned a lot lately is Sami Vatanen, 8% owned. I think it must have been I don't know if it was a weekend preview or the week preview. I don't understand why he's this low still. He's ever since he got top power play, which was a while ago at this point, he's been shooting a lot more often. And that's the weird thing is I'm looking at the numbers. I'm not exactly sure where the shots are coming from. He shoots on the power play, but not a whole lot. It just seems to be that after they started deploying him more in the offensive zone, a decent amount more, not like huge numbers, but he's above 50%, which is about where he floated all of last season. So he's basically being treated as more of an offensive defenseman, and it's working out for him. His points have been really good over the last week. He's point per game, but come on. I think realistically, you can expect something flirting with 50-point pace, which obviously doesn't make him like your best defenseman. But if you're getting a guy that can get 50 points or, at a 50-point pace with right now, he's shooting at 3 shots a game over the last 10 games, which is great. That's excellent for a defenseman. And his peripherals actually haven't been that bad either. His blocks have been amazing lately, and his hits are not great, but he'll get you around 100 on the season as a pace. So everything looks like solid. I'm not seeing any glaring holes. I don't know why he's being talked about. Maybe it's because he's not. I feel like a lot of players that we hear about. Maybe this is the reason that we saw Pajot be 75% owned while Duclair was 15%. Is that when they score a bunch all at once, that's when they really show up on the radar, and it takes them a while to take off of it. Whereas Vatanen's just kind of been like consistently above average for a while now. And that just doesn't quite, make your eyes pop the same way a hat trick will or whatever. Although over these last 3 games, I think we're going to see a huge spike in Duclair's ownership over the next couple of weeks, but we'll see.
Another thing, this is actually a great reminder. The Vatanen thing reminded me of this. And a guy like Vatanen, especially, who has seen injuries, right, and has missed time, it's so important to occasionally, when you're checking the wire, to check by averages.
Yes, definitely.
Because guys that get injured will always be hurt from a ranking standpoint. And I'm not against using rankings to make pickups. I actually do use them quite a bit to try to kind of guide me in the direction of, okay, who's been doing well at least? And then I dive in a little bit more just to see if it's sustainable or is it what I need for my team, that kind of thing. But the interesting with Vatanen is that in our league, in our main league with all the bangos, PIMs, power play points, shots on goal, hits and blocks, Sami Vatanen is actually 99th overall from a season average standpoint. When you look at season total, he's 200th.
Yep.
And I would 100% take a 100 ranked season average defenseman. That's huge that's a huge grab for anybody. And so a lot of times people pay attention too much to just the season total and forget to go look at the season average. And that's really, really important, especially with injured guys. And that also counts for your own team when you're making trades or anything like that. I think Stamkos is a good example of that. From a rank standpoint, everyone's disappointed because they're like, oh my God, Stamkos is like 90th ranked. What did I do? But then you look at averages and he's like top 10 or top 20 or whatever. Um, so just remember to use averages as well because they're just about as important.
if not
Now,
more.
my next guy here, yeah, if not more valuable. I mean, I put more stock into averages than I do
Yeah,
totals.
you just have to look at like the clear outliers that have played like 5 games or whatever. But
Exactly. Like if you're able to like eliminate those outliers and also look at sustainability, right? Because sometimes someone from an average standpoint, just you got to be a little bit careful. But I put way more stock into averages than I do almost always when I'm offering a trade or accepting a trade. Or evaluating a trade rather, I'll almost always evaluate based on averages. And it's actually a good way to sometimes, if you want to be a sneaky owner, it's a good way to buy low sometimes. You buy the guys who have great averages but low overall ranks, and you bank on the person not checking the averages. And it does happen. It does work sometimes, to be honest. Okay, my next guy here is a center from the Anaheim Ducks, Ryan Getzlaf. I did not expect him to get up to 64% ownership this year.
yeah,
I gotta admit, I was
actually
wrong.
it kind of took longer than I thought it would, considering how he's been consistently good for a long time now.
Yes, that is true. But at the beginning of the season, I did not expect this from Ryan Getzlaf.
Yeah. I mean, we were already
Did
talking
not
about the
expect
changing
this
the
at all.
guard and all that good stuff about how that
I
second line
know,
was
it's
clicking. But
crazy.
there goes all that.
He's point per game over his last 13 games.
Wow.
It's kind of insane. He's been really good. And the crazy thing is he's kind of like Kyle Connor. His shooting percentage is right in line. His on-ice shooting percentage, pretty much right in line. His IPP is, while it seems high over the last 13 games at 81%, he did finish at 75% last year. So it's not that crazy. I would like his power play percentage to be higher. It's sitting at only 52% over those last 13 games and the same percentage over the season. So I'd like that to be higher, but it's not the end all be all. He is playing more minutes now. He's playing around 20 minutes a game over his last three and 19 over his last 13 games on average. So it's slowly increasing, which is a very promising sign. His shots haven't really gotten that much better, to be honest. They've dipped a little bit over these last 30 and 7 days, but it doesn't really seem to be hampering very much. Yeah, he's sustainably high to me. It's kind of crazy. Both him and Kopi are, to me, virtually the same player in a way, in terms of like not a lot is expected of them, and yet they're very much killing it under the radar. It's really interesting. And I like how, I think it's funny that, we talk, I kind of buy it a little bit more this season, but we see so much goalies are voodoo talk, and yet centers don't get treated the same way. I always feel like centers are also voodoo. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but so of course not the top rank. It's not the same thing as like goaltenders. The issue is that you can draft like a Bobrovsky and he lets you down. It's much harder to draft McKinnon and have him let you down. But still, like we said in the preseason, right? Like I like waiting until the very end for centers, if not waiting from the waiver for centers. And this year it definitely would have worked out for you.
Yep. All right, my last one here is Robbie Fabry. Left wing, right wing, 9% owned. Since Mantha's been, well, this has not been since Mantha's been out, but lately he has taken Mantha's spot at the top right wing and been playing pretty well. His shooting is his shooting percentage over the last, well, actually on the season it's kind of high at 19%. By kind of high, I mean pretty high. But everything else seems pretty reasonable, and the fact that he's 9% owned seems a little bit low to me. He seems to be revitalizing this team a little bit, and he's been kind of the only bright spot on a really dreary team for a while now. His shot pace, everything has gone up since he moved to Detroit, because why wouldn't it? St. Louis they weren't really playing him the same way. He went from playing 12 to 13 minutes a game up all the way up to now he's playing 19 and 20 minutes a game. That's where I love seeing that. The huge increase in time on ice is going to, just by nature of being on the ice more, increase literally everything. And when you see such a dramatic increase, it makes you excited about players like this that have had that kind of hype about them for years now. And now we're seeing him firing at, roughly 3 shots a game over the last couple of weeks. He's got that primary power play real estate. So he's, as on there as much as everybody else. Although it seems like for some reason the sheet probably doesn't like him because he's on 2 teams. But I don't know what his power play percentage is on Detroit, but I know it's high because he plays power play 1 and they have a stacked power play 1. So, and he's been doing pretty decent on it. That's another reason he actually has points. He's one of the few on that team. So
Yep.
that's
He's actually at
go ahead.
41.5 power play percentage on the season from both teams.
Yeah. So I would see it. I mean, you could tell where that's coming from. He played nothing on St. Louis and everything on Detroit. So that's gonna go north as we go on. But I do think that we're gonna see Fabry's ownership climb a little bit. He's not one of these guys I think is gonna be like a long-term hold, but at 9%, I'm surprised he's not owned in deeper leagues. 14-person league, I feel like he'd be on my team. And I do think that anytime Detroit has a good schedule, I'm going to be looking Fabry's way. It's really hard to pick up power play producers on the wire, and he's one.
Yeah. I like Fabry a lot. What's interesting is I was actually looking at his stats right now, and in 2016-2017 in St. Louis, he played 51 games, had a 47-point pace over those 51 games, or played at a 47-point pace, and he actually played the same amount of power play percentage that he is now. And it's interesting that his pace is almost exactly the same as what his pace is this year.
Well, the pace has changed quite a bit since he joined Detroit, to be fair.
Yeah, on Detroit, it is different, but it is interesting that his time on ice is pretty similar. His average time on ice is very similar. His power play percentage deployment is very similar, just from a season standpoint, right? I'm curious to see how it changes going forward, but it is very similar that he's playing very similarly to how he has in the past with similar deployment in St. Louis. And not to say similar deployment, sorry, I meant more similar minutes.
Yeah, well, St. Louis was playing he averaged 9 minutes.
Nothing.
Or 940 a game. Now he's getting 17
so the
plus
fact
in
that
Detroit.
he's back up to 14. Yeah.
Well, way over 14.
Okay, now
Ever since he
in-
joined Detroit, he's been averaging 17.
Now moving into Sustainably Low. And I guess I would like to put all of Detroit on this list.
Except for
but
Fabry.
Brandon said that wasn't allowed. Yeah, except for Fabry. But Brandon said that wasn't allowed. They said there's actually still some good players there. So instead, I'm going to go talk about the Rangers, who suck. As a team, they are definitely sustainably low. The way they are playing right now is definitely not sustainable. And one of the big people that are hurting the most, aside from Kako, is Chris Kreider, who surprisingly to me is still 47% owned. Left wing. I don't know if people are holding on in hopes that he gets traded or something. I don't really get it. He's not really doing much this season. His minutes are down a little bit. His shots are down about 23%. His points, he's a 40-point player right now. That's not worth holding. He has a good team power play percentage, and that's about it. That's virtually all he's doing. His hits pace is actually down. His blocks pace is virtually the same.
I'm kind of surprised you're ragging on the Rangers right now. They're 6-3-1 in the last 10.
Have you seen how badly they get outshot? They are the New York Islanders, but without a good team.
Do the Islanders have a good team?
The Rangers, I get, I think that there's two sides to the coin. On one hand, the Rangers have been very good at picking their spots, and they've scored when they needed to. But the thing is that, this goes back to that first time we were talking, the first thing we talked about, right? About unsustainability not being about when it happens. It's just that it's going to happen most likely, more likely, not that it will happen, but that most likely it will happen. And that's how the Rangers are playing right now, with the way they are getting outshot. And this happened at the beginning of the season too. They went on this tear of winning games, and then they just got slaughtered. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, are the Rangers bad again?" Like, no, they were always bad. They were just getting lucky. And that's a lot of what's happening right now. I mean, Georgiev playing like he did in back-to-backs, and then they shutting out the Vegas Golden Knights. Okay, I got it all out of my system.
Well, that's good. My first one is Shea Theodore. Oh.
Wow. That's I'm proud of you. I'm honestly proud of you. I know that wasn't easy.
I'm annoyed because the numbers are all still good. It's just like at this point, he's Clefbaum. He's he's every year except for this year's Clefbaum. He's 61% owned, but the shots are there, the deployment's there, the offensive zone starts are there. He starts 70% of his shifts in the offensive zone. Not that many, but 70%, because this it doesn't include neutral zone starts. So 70% of the time he'll be in the offensive zone as opposed to being in the defensive zone anyway. But everything is there. It just isn't happening. And at this point, you just have to assume, okay, maybe he's going to be a 40-point guy with good shots. I don't know. I'm still holding on to him in a bunch of leagues, but I'm really close to calling it quits. I still like him in dynasty leagues. I think I can't really imagine that he's a total lost cause. I mean, they clearly believe in him, or at least they're trying to. So, with that said, how much credit can you give him anymore? Is he just going to be the same as he was last season, of 40-point type guy, and that's it with decent shots? I don't know. I think we just have to assume it at this point until he says otherwise. But I mean, if you just gave me these raw numbers, said it was a defenseman, and didn't tell me who it was, I would tell you they're unsustainably low. But what else can you say at this point? It's been going on for so long.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. Context matters, right? And in the context of Shea Theodore, we've held out hope for so long, and it hasn't happened. And I think that, especially when you have a guy like Shea Theodore, who I think that right now you can drop and won't be picked up, there's no reason rostering a guy like that.
Yep.
And especially, I think that there's an advantage when a guy is 61% owned, because you can get a little bit ahead of the curve, and potentially jump on him a little bit later. Or sometimes I like making other people drop someone that I want, or hopefully drop someone I want for that guy. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Shea Theodore is droppable. My next guy
I hope
here.
it's a reverse jinx.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, this guy, he's confusing as hell. Vincent Trocheck, center, 57% owned. Now, remember I told you that I would mention if I would explicitly say if someone was drop worthy or pickup worthy or whatever. I think Vincent Trocheck is just straight up drop worthy.
Oh boy.
I do not think he's worth owning at all anymore. For one, he's a center. There's a lot of depth at center. And on top of that, he's playing 15 minutes a game over his last 3. He's playing only 16 minutes a game over his last 14. On the season, he's at 17, which is still a whole 13% lower than last year. Everything is bad for him. Shots are down. His points are actually up by 1 point from last year, from a pace perspective. 52 versus 51 last year. So again, like, this may be who he is, right? We wanted him to be different, but this is just maybe who he is. It's very similar to Shea Theodore. His offensive zone starts are incredibly healthy. Last year, he actually only had 48% offensive zone starts. On the season this year, he has 67%. But then it gets really worrying that his face-off win pace is down, his hits pace is down, his blocks pace is exactly the same. His team power play percentage is way down from last year. Only 27% of the team's power play in that second power play unit sucks. His IPP is exactly the same as last year. His on-ice shooting percentage has actually gotten better. His shooting percentage is similar to last year. This is who he is, I think. As disappointing as it is, as much as we'd like Vincent Trocheck to be someone else, on the current Florida Panthers team and the way it is currently constructed, Vincent Trocheck is nothing more than most likely a 50-point player.
Yeah, it really isn't looking good. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
It hurts your soul.
I will talk about John Klingberg, though.
No, you're not.
Power play 2. That's kind of, I mean, there's nothing else to say about it. As long as he's power play 2, he's sustainably low. It doesn't mean he can't take back over power play 1. We talked about this maybe an episode or 2 ago, that I do believe he'll be power play 1 again. And this is, like you said, we talk about some guys that we'd say is drop worthy. I don't think I would drop. I know I wouldn't drop Klingberg, but I also am not expecting anything out of him until he gets that top power play back. We've talked, ad exhaustion on this podcast about how scoring defensemen typically are only really worth it if they're power play 1. You looked at last season, there was, I think, 1 or 2 players that got around 45 points as a non-top power play defenseman, and it was Ryan Ellis and Ryan McDonough. That's it. It just feels like it's not a good sign for Klingberg. I guess Shattenkirk's gonna be that guy this season, but
I will say this: since I own Klingberg, I have taken a look at this, and there is one positive here. His deployment hasn't really changed over these last 3 games, in which he only got 1 point, versus his last 8 games. Across both his last 8 games and his last 7 days, which are the 3 games. They both were around that 40% mark of the team's power play percentage. And if you look at the last 8 games, which is a larger sample size, so I choose to look at that a little bit more, his shot pace is pretty much the same as last year. His shooting percentage is virtually the same as last year. He was a 62-point player there. If he played 82 the same exact way he was, his IPP was healthy. His on-ice shooting percentage was only 9%. So, like, at a 5-on-5 perspective, he's actually playing really well still.
Right, but no power play one.
But no power play one. But this is where I got excited, because if that's what he's doing 5-on-5, if he can get power play one, there's a ceiling that's higher than what he's currently doing. There is potential for a really, really big year out of John Klingberg if he can play like he currently is on fives, and then also get the power play one. The question is, of course, then also, though, is his 5 sustainable? And right now it's a yes, but that I think is to be seen, given that Dallas, yet again over these last 7 days, dropped to really low on-ice shooting percentages. And I think the whole problem with all of Dallas at the moment is just on-ice shooting percentage. Can it actually be up? Because, they had that really good week, and now they're back to not being able to score goals.
Yeah. I don't know. I need him to get power play one back, because there was a few fundamental things that changed over that course of time too. It's not so evident. For that 30 days, yeah, his power play was low, but he got 4 power play points. And those came from when they were doing that 1A, 1B thing, and they're not doing it anymore. They're stacking the top power play, which is bad for him. So, I mean, I have him in at least one league. I might have him in 2. Everything gets blurry, but I'm just not happy, basically, and just waiting for things to change.
I feel like this is just the episode where I pick on centers. But my next one here is out of Nashville, and that's Ryan Johansson. Center, 39% owned. A lot of people always ask if they should pick him up when he gets put on waivers.
Him and Duchesne, actually.
Yeah, him and Duchesne both. And yeah, Johansson's not worth it, folks. 50-point pace on the season, 27 over his last 12 games. His shooting percentage is fine. His on-ice shooting percentage is actually really low, as is his IPP. But I really don't like his deployment, to be honest. Just not high on him turning it around. Last year, he was a 66-point guy. I don't really know that's worth holding. And on top of that, Ryan Johansson really limits your off nights. He's really inconsistent as well. It's just not... I just don't think he's worth it anymore. And 39% owned again. It's kind of one of those things where, similar to Trocheck, we're like, okay, I get the name value and you don't want to drop, and especially at 39% owned, there's a chance that he's owned mostly in deeper leagues. But even deeper leagues, I'd much rather have that streaming option. And let's say that Johansson's playing your util spot, right? Which I would assume is probably the case. Like, if Johansson's your second center, especially drop, but especially if he's in your util spot, I mean, that's a waste. It's a complete waste. And on top of that, you're losing off nights.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would try to move on from Johansson. And if he's on your wire, I am not rushing to pick up.
No. My last one here is Carter Hutton, who is still 39% owned. Just leaving it there. He's not the starter anymore. He's got over a 3 goal against average and a 901 save percentage on the season. Fun for a while, but nope. That ship has sailed. If you're one of the 40% still owning him, why? You're better off with either streaming that spot or just dropping him outright and picking up somebody else. I'd rather have Corpusalo or like some of these other options at this point. Nielsen. I'd rather have Nielsen. I don't know. I'd rather just not have a goalie.
Yeah,
in most cases.
I agree. Honestly, I don't even know if I'd touch Olmark at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we have in one of our leagues, of course, but
yeah, I think the Sabres just suck.
Safe to say things have gone weird for us in one of our leagues, but yeah, it happens.
Yeah, just a little bit. So there you go. That is your unsustainable episode. If you haven't already, we always get asked, people try to ask, well, if I don't have money, how can I help you guys out? And the number one way to help us out is by leaving a review.
Yep.
Whether that's on iTunes or on Stitcher or anywhere that you listen, it really does help us out. Or even if it's just putting in a good word on Twitter about us or something like that, it really, really does help us out. And we also love to see what people think. And if you can't leave a review anywhere, You can also email us fantasyhockeypodcast@gmail.com and tell us how much you love the pod, or tell us what you don't like and what you'd like to see different, or what you'd like to get added. We really do listen and appreciate all the feedback. So pay attention to this weekend. There may or may not be a weekend preview because, as you know, I will be driving cross country. There should be a sit start Saturday, so keep an eye out for that. And aside from that, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Yep. Thanks for listening.